Warning: the following podcast might be too truthful for most liberals. Listener discretion is therefore advised.
Welcome to the Tea Party Power Hour. This is a very special day on the Tea Party Power Hour. We're welcoming back an old friend, Dr. Jerome Corsi. Dr. Jerome Corsi has a Ph.D. from Harvard in government and, frankly, has so many New York Times bestsellers that even J.K. Rowling would say, wow, that guy has a lot of bestsellers. But he's here today to talk to us about climate change, the crisis that isn't. You have an article out in the American Thinker, and you also have a book entitled The Truth About Energy, Global Warming, and Climate Change, Exposing Climate Lies in the Age of Disinformation. Dr. Corsi, welcome back to the show. It's been too long.
Well, it's great to be back with you, Mark. Thank you very much.
Well, looking at the whole climate change thing, I have to be honest with you, and you may not know this, but this show started out a long time ago as a show called Global Cooling Radio. And what I would do is bring in climate realists from around the world. The alarmists like to call us deniers, but I'd bring in climate realists from around the world to refute what we were hearing from the Al Gore crowd. So it's a subject very near and dear to my heart, and it's kind of, and I'd like to get your opinion on this, it kind of surprises me that it hasn't gone away. I mean, every prediction they make fails to come true, and yet they just ignore it like, they never made the prediction, and they make another one and keep going forward. It seems to have a lot of resilience.
Well, this basically is a neo-Marxist movement. It's cultural Maoism. The climate IPCC group knows the science is not legitimate. They understand that Michael Mann rigged the statistics for the hockey puck, which said that the Earth had perfect temperature until the Industrial Revolution. We started using hydrocarbon fuels, and suddenly Earth's temperature shot up like the blade of a hockey stick and became very hot. Mm-hmm. It's nonsense. Earth has been around 4.6 billion years. We've had a lot more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere 600 million years ago than we do today.
I want to throw something out there.
Ice ages.
I'd like to throw something out there about Michael Mann and his hockey stick. You and I, before we went on, were talking about the pharmaceutical industry a little bit. Michael Mann was originally using a data set that consisted of tree ring data, and it did not show the hockey stick shape. In fact, it showed that the planet had started to cool. Well, of course, Michael Mann couldn't have that. So for the latter part of the curve, where you see the hockey stick shooting up, he used surface station data. So, when you drive down the road and your car exhaust blows all over these little climate collection stations, that's what he used. And we were talking about pharmaceuticals. Dr. Corsi, this is the equivalent of if a pharmaceutical company was doing a study, and as the study went on over the years, they noticed there was a higher mortality rate in the patients who were taking the drug that was being studied. And they said, oh, no problem. We'll just switch out data sets. We'll bring in some more patients. I know that he put in his paper that he had done this, that he had changed data sets at the end of the study, and he didn't see anything wrong with it. And he was completely upfront with it. But I just don't think that anyone would agree that changing data sets at the end of a study is a way to go about getting accurate information.
Well, that's exactly one of the major points I make in this book, The Truth About Energy, Global Warming, and Climate Change, that the science is not legitimate. And there's a book out, too, that was written by Matthias Desmet called The Psychology of Totalitarianism. And he begins by demonstrating that the science being published by the left is rigged, it's not legitimate, it's not valid, the data is falsified, and they get away with it because, again, this is an ideological movement. It is not based on truth science, and the ideology is totalitarian. This leftist movement, this is not the left of the 1960s. This is the left of a cultural revolution, which has created its own reality. And that reality is a utopian reality of Marxism. Let's imagine the world without police. Let's imagine there was no God. Let's imagine there were no boundaries. Well, I'd like to imagine there was no John Lennon, because this is all nonsense. And these people are into the imagining, not into the reality. The reality is that the Earth has had a very changeable climate. If we had a hot summer, it's for a variety of reasons. The El Nino, the currents of the ocean in the Pacific are ascending, and that makes it warmer. Sun cycle 25 is warmer than sun cycle 24. We're in 25 right now. It's warmer. We had this Tonga explosion of a volcano undersea, probably the biggest explosion ever recorded undersea. It sent a stream, a plume of ash and water vapor into the stratosphere. It's recorded by our satellites. That put a lot of water vapor up into the atmosphere. Water vapor is 70% of all greenhouse gases. That makes it warmer. Human beings had nothing to do with any of these things. The power here is much more massive than human beings could exert. And the idea that a little bit more carbon dioxide will just make things greener, we'll just have more trees, we'll have more food. And what my article today in American Thinker says is that basically good climate scientists like Will Happer, who, professor emeritus from Princeton, and Richard Lindzen, who's another professor emeritus of Earth and planetary science, these are both making a legal case that the agencies like the EPA are making rulings not on legitimate science, and they're violating some Supreme Court decisions which say that opinions that these agencies might not like to take into account but have scientific validity, like the Earth is not warming up because of carbon dioxide. These agencies cannot make policy by ignoring those studies. And again, I think the climate scientists are organizing to produce court challenges because they know the EPA regulations about getting rid of hydrocarbon fuels by 2030 are going to kill and starve millions of people, because our food chain depends upon various hydrocarbon chains, like nitrogen chains, to fertilize enough crops that we can feed the 8 billion people on Earth. And we have 8 billion people because we're in an interglacial warming period. It's very productive. We ought to be thankful we're doing this. When we go into the next ice age, which we will do, as the sun, we get our orbit around the sun more elliptical, we get farther away from the sun, it's going to get cold. We're going to have another ice age, and it's not going to have anything to do with carbon dioxide being used because we're burning hydrocarbon fuels. It's going to have to do by the fundamental fact that the sun heats the Earth. We're farther away, we get less of the sun.
When you go back to the beginning of all this with people like Maurice Strong, I think as far back as the 70s, and of course the UNIPCC was founded in 1988, what was the original goal? I mean, what do you think the original goal really was? I mean, was Maurice Strong legitimate in his concerns about the environment, or was it, I guess, what author James Delingpole called the watermelon syndrome from day one, green on the outside, red on the inside? What are your thoughts on the origins of this?
The origins, I trace this in the book. I say after World War II, you had people like Harrison Brown, who was a scientist who worked on the Manhattan Project, the atomic bomb in World War II, starting writing books about the challenges we were going to face and saying there were too many people, we were going to use up the resources of the Earth. And that movement got taken over by Paul Ehrlich with the population bomb,
yeah.
a book he wrote in 1968, and too many people, got to get rid of them. And John Holdren, who became science czar for Obama, joined forces with Ehrlich and said, wait a minute, if you really want to destroy capitalism and kill people, depopulate, you got to make an existential threat. He said, we got a good one, and that hydrocarbon fuels emit carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas. And we can say that because of that, in the Industrial Revolution, human beings are causing the Earth to either become too warm or too cold. First, I said it was going to be an ice age. Well, then, when that didn't develop, when the Earth's temperatures became warmer, naturally shifting, they said, okay, we're going to have global warming. Now, they knew at the time that that was hoax science. But because human beings are prone to these ideas. Goebbels knew it with Hitler. Tell a lie often enough, simple idea, like Middle Ages. all women are crazy. They must be possessed by the devil, so we ought to burn them at the stake. Bad idea. But a lot of women were brutally killed because of that phenomenon of hoax that captivated the minds of people at the time. And that's the problem we've got, that human beings are subject to lies, and they're powerful enough for human beings to believe them and propagate them. We're doing the same with the climate hoax today. It's junk science.
I agree with you 100%. And I don't know about everyone in the audience, but I personally don't like to be lectured about science from people who can't define what a woman is, who think men can have periods and men can get pregnant, and that an unborn baby is just a useless clump of flesh. The left does not have a really good history when it comes to science and agreeing with the science, and they're wrong about this too. I think one of the interesting things about the UN IPCC is that the people involved in it have often quit. When scientists who legitimately believe all this stuff have joined the UN IPCC, they have come away thinking, oh my goodness, this is a body that renders out political decisions, not scientific decisions. And I think a lot of people may not know that when the UN IPCC puts out a report, they have one that they give to the politicians and the journalists and the media, and they have another one that's more for scientists. And there have actually been years, Dr. Corsi, when the version of the report they give to the media and to the politicians is at odds with the scientific version that they reserve for the academics. So very inconsistent. A lot of people have quit that organization because they're not interested in science. And it's interesting that this group has so much power in our world. I mean, the media quotes them as if they could not possibly be wrong. And just like all the other alarmists, they can put out prediction after prediction that fails to come true, and yet it's just ignored, or they change titles. I mean, we all know liberals are the masters of euphemism. And at first it was global cooling. Well, it stopped cooling. So then it became global warming. Well, then it stopped warming. So then it became climate change and climate chaos and anything else you want it to be. You know, you can stretch that into other things from the liberals. Killing unborn babies is female reproductive health care. A young child cutting off their private parts or their breast is considered gender-affirming health care. It all sounds so innocuous. It all sounds so innocent and so helpful. And it's the same thing with climate change. They're appealing, I think in the case of young people, to our need to want to do good, to our need to want to leave the planet better than we've found it. And the young people buy into this. But if you take any kind of an objective look at it, I mean, doesn't it just fall apart at the seams in terms of the actual science?
Well, yes, it does. I mean, I'm holding a book here written by Judith Curry. It's called Climate Uncertainty and Risk, Rethinking Our Response. Now, Judith Curry was a very prominent, she's a professor emerita of Earth and Atmospheric Science at the Georgia Institute of Technology. And she left the universities several years ago because she was a believer in this global warming, enthusiastically at first. And then when the emails in this ClimateGate from East Anglia Computer exposed Michael Mann and the others exchanging emails in which they self-confessed to rigging the data on the hockey stick, she bolted. And she said, this is nonsense. Now, the core of her book is mathematical. She says that the nature of the mathematics governing climate are nonlinear. In other words, you can't predict because the variables come out one way. If they're in a certain configuration, they come out another way. If they're in a different configuration, you can't. That's why weathermen are, you can't tell what the weather's going to be tomorrow. You make a guess from today, but, your weather meteorologists on television are generally not right. And that's the problem because the mathematics are such, and that's an intrinsic problem. So you can't say X amount of additional carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is going to be X amount of warming. And the models that you have, always these mathematical models on which the IPC relies, over-predict catastrophes because they're built to overpredict catastrophes. We have hurricanes. Hurricanes are natural. They're part of the Earth's mechanism of distributing heat. The Earth gets most of its sun at the equator. And the Earth has a mechanism called weather that distributes that heat to the poles and into the upper atmosphere, so the planet isn't too cold to survive. And that causes sometimes to be dramatic weather. We've had hurricanes, we've had storms, we've had volcanoes, we've had all kinds of earth changes. The mountains have risen, the continents have separated. The ice ages went away, and it wasn't because the cavemen in their little caves with their little carbon fires caused the earth to warm up. That was insignificant. What forces that control the climate are beyond human control. 5 extinctions where almost everything on the planet died before human beings got here. And the earth is not managing its temperature to make us to our pleasure. The earth is managing its temperature to distribute heat, and it will continue to do so. And as the earth changes in dynamics, we get farther from the sun, the earth is going to change how it manages weather. And that's just the facts. And the point is, legitimate climate scientists know this. They know this is a hoax. They know, and the people propagandizing this, their goal is to get us to stop using hydrocarbon fuels, to reduce the efficiency of the industrial state, produce less food, and kill billions of people. You got Jane Goodall going on the World Economic Forum saying we'd be better off with 500 million people. That means 95% of the people in the world she wants dead. These people are very dangerous.
Why do they want the people dead? They're some of the people on the planet as well. Of course, I imagine they consider themselves to be part of that 500 million that gets to stay. But how do they benefit from the population going down? Is this some kind of weird belief they have, or is there some ulterior motive?
It's another quirk in human psychology that happens when populations, it's been demonstrated scientifically, when populations grow, even among mice, they stop reproducing and eventually they start turning on each other. So, yes, Jane Goodall assumes she's going to be one. The World Economic Forum, just a small oligarchs with their machines, and 95% of human beings just want to eat. They're worthless. We'd be better off without them. We don't need them. We can be God. We can make this place perfect. Look, we exhale carbon dioxide. It's not noxious. It feeds plants, part of the natural cycle. But because we exhale it, you can see this is a self-loathing movement. They hate human beings. And that's at the heart of Marxism. Marxism is not about a utopia. It's about promising a utopia, and then millions of people die. And both Stalin and Mao made sure they died in massive famines, which is a horrible way to die. And again, the climate change movement today is trying to cut the food chain. You all got to eat bugs. You can't eat meat. We're not going to use nitrogen fertilizer. We're going to produce less abundant, agricultural products, and people are going to die. And they don't care. They're willing to kill babies in the womb. They don't care. Life is not important to them. They don't believe in God. They don't see life as having an intrinsic value. Julian Simon, a great resource economist, said the only ultimate resource is human intelligence. And these people have God-given rights. How many geniuses did Hitler kill in the Holocaust? How many precious souls were lost in World War II, where 50 to 100 million people were killed? Well, if we have World War III, it's going to be billions killed. And Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum won't care.
When you look at how they're going about this, children, much like with the LGBT movement, are being targeted. I remember one year, I think the National Climate Conference was in Copenhagen, and they opened it with a film of a little girl running from a flood. She holds onto the lower branch of a tree as the water starts to rise. I've seen where the Build-A-Bear people put out a movie where they said Santa wasn't going to come that year because there wasn't enough snow for him to be able to take off in his sled. I've seen a picture that they used to promote climate change of a girl who was hanging from a noose by a tree, and she had a block of ice under her feet that was supporting her, and it was starting to melt. In the UK, there was a commercial of this father reading a bedtime story to his little girl that was all doom and gloom about how the world was going to be destroyed by humans. And in fact, at that time in the UK, child psychologists said they were seeing an increase in patients because children were having nightmares about global warming. So is that what the left does? Anytime they come out with a crazy idea, they target the group that's most vulnerable, most impressionable, a group without enough life experience to know that it's a hoax, that it's nonsense. Speak to me about their methods and their techniques of getting more and more people to believe this nonsense.
Well, going back to the 1950s, there was a woman named Dowd who testified. She was a communist, and she saw that it was a lie. She testified before Congress, and she said that communists are targeting the young, and they're working on the schools because anyone who's older has been better educated. They know science. They're not going to buy this lie. But if you get them young, you can indoctrinate them. First of all, you dumb them down. Don't teach them science. Don't teach them how to read. Don't teach them mathematics. And then fill them with this hate about class hatred, race hatred, all these tensions, and make them feel afraid if you don't do what we say as communists, you're going to die. There's going to be, Earth is going to be, these people are evil, burning hydrocarbon fuels, which are nasty. They're dinosaur soup. They don't realize that oil is a natural product of the earth. It's abiotic. No dinosaur ever made any oil. I explain that in this book as well. And the point is that indoctrinating the young can create these Gretas. They become absolutely afraid that mommy and daddy are killing me because you're putting that gasoline in your car, and I'm going to die because you're greedy and you're using Earth's resources and you're not conserving, and let me be in control, and let's let these people be in control. Well, those people are the ones who are going to kill you. And that was their plan from the beginning, to get you to stop doing what is productive and to get you to stop believing in God. They start with saying there is no God. Marx knew there was God. He was not an atheist. He hated God. Same as Saul Alinsky, who wrote the rules for radicals in the 60s, and he goes with an introduction praising Lucifer. Satan dared to be a rebel, and he got a kingdom for it. These people hate God, and they hate themselves. They hate people. It's a negative, destructive ideology that is not truth-based. And that's what I'm explaining with all this global warming hoax. We really are a minor impact on Earth's temperature. These forces are far greater than human beings are capable of affecting. As far as the Earth is concerned, we're just the latest species walking on the surface of the Earth. There's a lot before us who are gone. And as far as the Earth is concerned, we might be gone. And it's not going to have anything to do with burning hydrocarbon fuels or putting a little more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. They'll just grow more trees and produce more food.
We had kind of talked about the Earth regulating its own affairs. And one of the things people forget is that when you put more carbon dioxide out there, it expands the plant base. There are more plants, there are more trees, there are more shrubs, and that increases the carbon sink, which means we're able to absorb. The plants, of course, are going to take in the carbon dioxide and then release oxygen. Perfect relationship with humans. We take in oxygen, we put out carbon dioxide, the plants take in the carbon dioxide, put out oxygen. So when you look at that, it seems like it's almost kind of a self-regulating system. More carbon dioxide means more plants. That increases the carbon sink, which brings the carbon dioxide levels back down. I look at that and say, from that standpoint, I don't see where we would have anything to worry about, even if CO2 levels did cause global warming, but it doesn't, at least not to any major extent. And the other thing, if I can go back to this point, Jerry, the people who promote this admit they lie. They admit they lie. I've never seen a situation where people come out and say, we're going to lie to you, and then people still believe them. Al Gore famously said, I believe that it is okay to have an overrepresentation of the facts in order to get people to pay attention to this very important issue. Well, an overrepresentation of the facts, what does that mean? It means he's lying. And then you've got people that are entertainers like Sheryl Crow said that when she went to the bathroom, she would only use one tiny sheet of toilet paper. And people began joking like, well, I'm not going to shake hands with her. And then she came out and said, well, that's not really true. I was just trying to motivate others to do something for the environment. And all of these people, whether it's Leonardo DiCaprio or, you name the movie star, they preach this stuff to the little people, but then they fly all over the world in private jets, as does Al Gore. So this is sort of one of those, do as I say, not as I do type things. But my question to you as well is, when you see the types of people who get behind this, especially the Hollywood types, what is their motivation? Is this a chance for a photo op for the latest cause celeb, or do they have some ulterior motives that aren't that good?
Well, first of all, the hypocrisy of the neo-Marxist and cultural Maoism is rampant. I mean, it's abundant. They lie. They promise you utopia, and they plan to kill you. I mean, these movements are evil. And the Marxism has dominated Hollywood since just about the beginning, and these people know that if they come out supporting Donald Trump, or their careers are going to end. They know the universities, if they don't buy onto the climate change nonsense, they're not going to get tenure, not going to get funded. And this control of the narrative is what this postmodern, we're in a cultural revolution, and this indoctrination is rampant. Now, when you learn to see God, the amazing thing about this place is you're pointing out the carbon cycle, that at every level there are rules, and the rules work, and the rules are productive to life. We exhale carbon dioxide. Trees, as you point out, the carbon cycle, absorb it. It's a natural cycle. The earth is self-regulating, even to the subatomic level. All these particles work together, and they behave by laws. Everything's alive. I mean, there's subatomic activity going on in plants and trees and rocks. It's not just stationary sitting there. At a different level, it's very active and is operating according to rules. God put these rules here. And that's important to understand. You can't deny God and expect to come out with truth. And that's part of the fundamental psychology of how God built this place. You have to learn to see God in everything. Once you do, the lies these people tell are obvious, ridiculous, and the people are silly, and their goal is to kill people. They're very hateful, and you begin to see it all as evil and satanic. Unfortunately, this is dark side, Garden of Eden. You can eat this tree, you eat this fruit of knowledge. God didn't want you to know this. I'll show you how I'm in charge, and you will be the masters of the universe, not God. A lie. It starts with a lie. And God told us this in the Bible in Genesis, and it was fundamental to human psychology to understand why we're here. And once you learn to see that, you see the lies told from the beginning by Marx, that are told today by the climate change movement, and they know they have to lie in order to make you believe the world works the way they want you to think it works without God.
When you look at the world of academia, and if you remember the movie Expelled by Ben Stein, there is very, very little tolerance for anyone who doesn't toe the line. And that's true with evolution. It's true with climate change. If you're in the math or stat department at a college and you dare say that there were some improbable things about the 2020 election, you're going to be ostracized. There really is even though the left claims that, we're about inclusion and we welcome everybody and we don't judge people, we're not haters. The fact is, unless you're towing their line when it comes to evolution, when it comes to climate change, when it comes to the 2020 election, you are going to be ostracized or worse. I mean, every time I open my email inbox, I'm reading about some bank that is telling somebody, we don't want you as a customer anymore because you believe in traditional marriage or you don't believe in climate change or you support Donald Trump. So there's nothing inclusive about what the left is doing. And part of all this, in addition to the fact that they're targeting young people, is that from a career standpoint, from a financial standpoint, there can be some huge prices to pay if you don't go along with the nonsense. Am I right about that? Or
you're exactly right about it. When Herbert Marcuse in the 60s, who was a Frankfurt School, he was a Marxist, neo-Marxist. He knew that workers of the world weren't going to revolt. He was, following Gramsci. He was trying to, an Italian communist. He's trying to destroy the culture of capitalism. And he said basically that we're going to have intolerance. We're not going to tolerate repressive ideas. We're going to only allow the ideas that advance us into this utopia. And so we're going to imagine the utopia, because as a postmodernist, he thought there's no objective reality. We create our reality. So we're going to create, that all human beings are liberated. Well, what does that mean? Well, Marcuse came out with the real liberation is uninhibited sex. And they began sex, drugs, and rock and roll to destroy the culture, break up the families. They promoted birth control to separate sex from procreation. They decided that they were going to attack babies in the womb as useless clumps of flesh. There were too many people. These are the ideas they propagated. And they know they're lying. They know that this isn't true, but they are not going to tolerate anybody saying the truth because they know they'll be exposed. And they want to propagate their agenda. They get to succeed like Hitler, they'll produce World War III. They end up in war. They end up in mass starvation. That's the history of communism. And it's going to happen again. And the only fight against this is I'm at the point of encouraging people on all my podcasts, my new website, thetruthcentral.com. We've got to start with the truth. We've got to combine that with the message of 2 Chronicles 7:14. We've got to ask God for forgiveness for having taken God out of the schools, out of the public space, for killing so many babies in the womb. We let this happen. And we've got to ask God's forgiveness on this. And God will hear the prayer and heal the land. Now, what it'll take to heal the land may not be particularly pleasant, but I'm seeing that we're going to have to face it. And we better get on our knees and pray to God because God's judgment will be rendered. And human beings aren't going to like it. But you can't violate God's laws, just like that old television commercial. Don't violate Mother Nature.
Right.
The thunder and lightning come, and yes, you can't violate. There are rules here. There are ways things work. You can't make it up. Say, carbon dioxide is the temperature control knob of the earth. Nonsense. And if people believe this, they're deluded. And you won't, once they start getting deluded, you won't let anybody tell the truth until some child says, the emperor's got no clothes. Mommy, why is this guy in a dress teaching me story hour and showing me his genitals? Kids say, this doesn't make sense. Well, if it doesn't make sense to a kid, it's because the kid hasn't been socialized to know he's not supposed to object to this. Kids just tell you the truth. That's why Jesus said, bring the little children to me. He knew they told the truth.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things we're seeing in the schools, and I saw a father going on a rant about this on Twitter not too long ago. Oh, I should say X, not too long ago. And he said that, his kid gets to school and the teacher asks him on the first day of class, this is a very young child, do you identify as a boy or as a girl? Now, what kind of a question is that to hit a kid with on the first day of school? And I can just imagine some kid not even understanding what they mean by identify, saying, well, I don't know. And then the next thing you know, they're calling the parents and saying, well, Billy's kind of confused. He doesn't know if he identifies as a boy or a girl. Or I guess if they call the parents, you're lucky. They may start trying to convert Billy into a girl without telling the parents. But I think it's just insane that we're seeing drag queens go into kindergarten classrooms. And, people have a problem with Ron DeSantis saying he's a book burner because liberals always exaggerate everything and lie. But if you look at one of the books that he was kicking out of Florida schools, it was basically a how-to book teaching pedophilia, and it was teaching young boys how to perform certain sexual acts on grown men. So, I mean, if you would have told me, and I'm now 60, if you'd have told me when I was in college that one day we were going to have to be arguing with leftists about whether or not drag queens should be allowed to go into kindergarten classrooms and recruit, I would say that's crazy. I mean, people would have to be out of their minds. No one is going to stand for that. Which brings me to another point. A lot of the insanity going on is being reinforced by the schools. The schools are pushing global warming. They're pushing the LGBT movement. They're pushing transvestites in kindergarten classrooms. How did the left take over the schools? And I'm talking about from kindergarten to grad school. They seem to have a grip on it.
Well, the left took over the labor movement, and then they took over the teachers union. The teachers union is one of the strongest remaining unions, and it's completely leftist, completely Marxist. And, you can't be in the teachers union or you can't be in education unless you spout this Marxist nonsense. And so therefore they control the culture. That's what this was all about. And if they can control the culture, they can implant these ideas that are dysfunctional. These are like malware in a computer. Once you begin to get critical theory in your brain and say everything is racist, you realize you're demonizing white people, you're being racist in reverse, and your mind is so confused, the computer generates garbage, and your mouth outputs garbage, and you believe in it passionately because you haven't been taught to think. You haven't been taught science. You don't know math. If I asked the average person to tell me what a differential equation is or explain a logarithm, 99% of the people couldn't do it.
Oh, let's
that
go.
Used to be taught in high school.
It was when I was there, but let's be honest. Most of them can't give change.
Just tap your card. You don't even have to put it in the slot. Just tap your card. But better yet, let's do optical recognition of your eyeball. So you just have to look at it, and you bought it. And this thing is down to, morons could exist in this society, and they want people with morons because these morons are incapable of resisting them. They don't have the intellectual hardware in order to say that what a child would say. Biden's got no clothes on. He's walking around naked. The guy is obviously has some form of senior dementia.
Oh, yeah.
And he's president. It's ridiculous. It's a joke. I mean, the best thing to do is laugh at this stuff and ridicule it because they become caricatures of themselves. They become bizarre. And you really want to eat bugs. You really want to live constantly locked down. You get 15-mile city. You don't have 3 new pieces of clothing you can buy a year. You can't eat meat. You want to live like these people want you to live? Only someone insane would submit to this, or someone who has been taught not how to think.
Well, and we certainly have an abundance of those people thanks to the school system. Once again, the name of the book is The Truth About Energy, Global Warming, and Climate Change, Exposing Climate Lies in an Age of Disinformation by Dr. Jerome Corsi. Before we let you go, Dr. Corsi, I have to ask, and let me just say something. I need to say this. When I look at the fiasco that was the Mueller investigation, I am so proud of the way you handled yourself in that investigation. You, unlike some people, you did not cave, you did not give in to them, you did not sign statements that were false that they wanted you to sign. You stood on principle, and I have to say that when I saw that going on in the mainstream media, in the media, I was so proud that I knew you. I was so proud that we had worked together with the Cold Case Posse, because there aren't many people like you left. So thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate that. But, the Mueller wanted me to say I had a connection to Julian Assange, which I did not. I was the last link. If they could prove I had a connection to Julian Assange, I knew the emails he was going to publish in advance. If I communicated that to Roger Stone. That was their case of Russian collusion. Well, I didn't have a tie to Julian Assange. I knew what his email release was going to be because I figured it out on my own. I told Roger Stone. I told others. But the point was they wanted me to say I was lying. They actually were going to give me a plea deal. They did give me a plea deal. That if you don't take this plea deal, we're going to put you in front of a jury in Washington. You'll go to prison the rest of your life, and we won't treat you nicely. And I said to them, I cannot stand before a judge and before God and swear to a lie to keep myself out of prison. You want to do that to me, go ahead. I am not taking your plea deal. And I faced that I might be in prison like that the rest of my life, and I decided if that was going to be the case, so be it. But I wasn't going to lie before God. They did not indict me. They were the liars. They had no case. But I did it simply because I could not imagine lying to God.
How many hours did they question you, and over what period of time?
It was 40 hours. I wrote a book on it called Silent No More.
Right.
And it was 40 hours, and it lasted over several months. And they would always meet, go to Washington. The FBI pick you up. They bring you to an unmarked building in Washington, and you have to surrender your cell phones, all your electronics. They brought you up to a room with no windows in it. And I faced an army of 3 Mueller prosecutors and 10 to 12 or more FBI, all there interviewing me. And if they forgot an email, they all jumped out of the room and said, now you've lied to us. They let me amend testimony. I did forget emails. I admitted I forgot the emails. I admitted that my testimony needed to be amended. They allowed it. And they were going to charge me with lying on testimony I'd amended. And I just basically said, I am not going to play your lying game to keep myself out of prison. My relationship with God, my relationship with the truth is too important, and I will not lie no matter what you do to me. And I stood by that, and I would do that again.
We need more like you, Dr. Corsi. There are plenty of people who would have caved, and as you know, some did. One in particular did. And when you look at that situation, it's almost as if they bring you in, they tell you what your testimony is going to be, and then they list out a number of very unpleasant consequences if you don't go along with them. And it basically, when that got out, and not just how you were treated, but by how others were treated by the Mueller team and by the FBI, so many people lost faith in our government, lost faith in the FBI. I happen to have a close friend whose uncle retired from the FBI. And when he retired, he was very proud that he had served in the FBI. Now, when people ask him, what he did for a career, he just says, I'm retired law enforcement, because he is so ashamed of what became of the FBI after he left. Now, that's where we are right now. Americans don't trust their elections. They don't trust the government. They don't trust the Department of Justice or the FBI. And it just seems to me that what we're really dealing here with is a mafia of sorts. I mean, everybody fears La Cosa Nostra, but it seems to me that the government mafia is much, much more powerful and has no problem destroying lives in order to further its goals. And they at one point had you on that list of people who they were ready to destroy if you didn't cooperate with them, but you stuck to your principles and came out okay. So once again, thank you for doing that, and I wish more people could find the courage to do what you did. We're out of time, but I do want to ask, perhaps you could come back another time and we could talk about Silent No More.
Oh, sure. I'll come back anytime you ask, Mark. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Once again, thanks for being here. It's been far, far too long. Very proud of the work that we did together during that time. Your book, Where's the Birth Certificate? I think, what did Obama release his birth certificate about 2 weeks before?
That's right. He tried to. That fake birth certificate he released, which we found the original from which it had been copied and proved that forensically.
Right. Yeah. Johanna Ani's birth certificate is the birth certificate.
That's right.
And there are so many coincidences, shall we say, that 2 different forensics teams working on 2 different continents with no knowledge of each other came to the same conclusions. So Good work on that as well as your work on John Kerry's Swift boat experiences. You've made some major contributions in your life to society, and I have a feeling you're not done. So want to have you back. We'll talk about Silent No More. And once again, really great catching up with you, Dr. Corsi.
Thanks, Mark. God bless you, and God bless your audience.
Very good. That's all we have for you today on the Tea Party Power Hour. I want to remind you, if you'd like to get a copy of our newsletter so you can stay up to date as far as which guests have been on the show or what news-breaking items have been released on the show, text the word TEA, that's TEA, to 44144.
You've been listening to the Tea Party Power Hour with Mark Gillar.